there is a moment. And if you have been married for any length of time, you know exactly what it feels like when you watch someone treat their spouse with contempt right out in the open, in front of other people, as if the person standing next to them does not matter at all, as if years of loyalty, sacrifice, and love mean absolutely nothing. Most of the time, when that happens in public, people look away. They go quiet. They tell themselves it is not their place to say anything. But Steve Harvey is not most people. What happened on the Family Feud stage on a warm Thursday afternoon in the spring of 2024 started like any other episode. Two families, a game show, some laughs, a chance to win money. But within 15 minutes, the entire studio, and millions of viewers watching at home, witnessed something that nobody on that production team had scripted, planned, or even imagined. A husband humiliated his wife. On live television, in front of 200 people, and in front of one of the most perceptive, principled men who has ever stood behind a microphone in American entertainment. What Steve Harvey did next has been called one of the most powerful moments in game show history. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was right, and in a world that sometimes forgets what right looks like. Seeing it happen, clearly and without apology, in the middle of a television studio, changed something for everyone who witnessed it. Hi Salta Estia Owen. Farstai Oki, if you believe that dignity and respect still matter in a marriage and in this world, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel, so you never miss a moment like this one. Ring that bell. This is the kind of story that gets buried, and the people who need to see it deserve to find it. To understand why this moment hit the way it did, you have to understand who was on that stage. Donna Mitchell was 54 years old. She had grown up in a small town in rural Georgia, the third of 5 children in a family that did not have much money but had an enormous amount of love and faith. Her mother had worked double shifts at a hospital laundry for 20 years to make sure her children had shoes that fit and food on the table every night. Her father had been a deacon at their local church, a quiet man who showed love not in grand speeches but in small, consistent acts of devotion, fixing a neighbor's fence, driving an elderly woman to her doctor's appointment, sitting at the kitchen table at midnight helping his children with their homework. Donna had learned from both of them. She grew up understanding that dignity was not something you were given. It was something you built, day by day, through the way you treated people, through showing up, through keeping your word, through doing the hard and unglamorous work that love actually requires. She had met her husband, Gary, when she was 26 years old. He was charming, funny, confident, the kind of man who fills a room when he walks into it. She had fallen in love with all of that. In the early years, it had been a good marriage. They had built a home together. They had raised 2 children, a son who was now in college studying engineering, and a daughter who had just started her first job as a school teacher. Donna had worked as a school administrator for over 2 decades, quietly and without fanfare, helping hundreds of students navigate the educational system. She was the kind of person that other people describe as a rock. Steady, dependable, always there. But somewhere in the last several years, something in the marriage had shifted. Gary had become dismissive, not cruel in any dramatic, obvious way, but in the smaller, sharper way that can be just as damaging. The eye rolls, the sighing, the habit of cutting her off in the middle of a sentence to correct something she had said, even when she was right. The way he talked about her to other people, not with cruelty exactly, but with a kind of casual condescension that said, louder than any argument could, I do not take you seriously. Donna had stayed. She had stayed because she believed in commitment. She had stayed because of her children, her faith, her genuine conviction that marriage was something you worked on rather than walked away from. She had stayed because in the quiet moments, when it was just the 2 of them, she still saw glimpses of the man she had married, but staying had cost her something. A piece of her confidence. A piece of the easy, natural sense of self-worth that she had carried as a young woman. She smiled as readily as she always had. She was warm and gracious and present for everyone around her. But the people who knew her best could see that somewhere underneath the smile, Donna Mitchell was tired. The Family Feud appearance had been a birthday gift, organized by her daughter, who had submitted the family's application as a surprise. Donna had been delighted. She loved the show. She had grown up watching it with her parents on Friday evenings, and the idea of being on stage with Steve Harvey, of having a moment of pure fun with her family, had genuinely lifted her spirits. Gary had agreed to come. He had seemed enthusiastic, at first. The Mitchell family, Donna, Gary, their daughter Asha, Donna's younger brother Calvin, and Gary's cousin Terrence, stepped onto the Family Feud stage to warm, generous applause. They were competing against the Okonkwo family from Philadelphia, a lively group whose energy immediately set a high bar for entertainment. Steve Harvey worked the stage the way he always does, loose, quick, genuinely funny, reading the room like a man who has spent his entire adult life understanding what makes people laugh and what makes them feel seen. He greeted both families with the same warmth, cracked a few jokes, got the crowd going. Everything was exactly as it was supposed to be. The game began well. The Mitchell family was competitive. Donna, in particular, was sharp, quick on the buzzer, confident in her answers, her face lit up with the kind of genuine joy that comes from doing something you have loved since childhood. Steve noticed it immediately. He gave her a smile during one early exchange that was more than just host warmth. It was the smile of someone who recognizes real enthusiasm. Then came the question that changed everything. Steve read from his card. We asked 100 people. Name something a wife does that her husband always brags about. Donna stepped up confidently. She thought for just a second, the kind of natural, unforced pause of someone who is actually processing the question rather than panicking about it. Then she smiled and answered, her cooking. Number 2 answer, 71 points. The audience cheered. Donna's daughter Asha hugged her. Calvin pumped his fist. It was a great moment, and then Gary laughed. Not the warm, proud laugh of a husband watching his wife do well. Not the delighted laugh of someone caught up in the fun of the game. It was the other kind. The short, dismissive, half-under-the-breath laugh that carries a very specific message. The kind of laugh that says, "Is that what you think?" He leaned slightly toward Terrence and said, not loudly, but loud enough for the microphones and the front rows of the audience to catch. Brag about her cooking. Man, I do all the cooking at home. A few people in the front row heard it. Some of them shifted uncomfortably. Donna heard it. For just a fraction of a second. A flicker so brief that most people would have missed it. The light in her face dimmed. She held her smile. She straightened her shoulders. She turned her attention back to the board, but Steve Harvey had seen it. Steve Harvey sees everything. He did not react immediately. That is one of the things that makes him exceptional at what he does. He does not perform. He processes. He allowed the game to continue for another minute. Another question, another answer, another round of applause, while he decided what kind of man he was going to be in the next 30 seconds. He had 2 choices. He could let it go. The game was running well. The audience was engaged. The professional, efficient thing to do was to keep moving, finish the round, move on. Or he could say something, during a natural pause in the game, a moment when the producer's cue in his earpiece gave him a beat of flexibility. Steve Harvey stepped away from the podium, turned to face the Mitchell family, and looked directly at Gary. The audience sensed the shift immediately. The laughter faded. People sat forward. Hold on, I need to stop for a second. Gary's expression was still casual, the expression of a man who does not yet realize that the room has changed. Sir, Steve said, not unkindly, but not softly either. I heard what you just said. Gary's smile flickered. He gave a small shrug, the kind of shrug that says this is nothing, you are overreacting. I was just joking, man, he said, just messing around. I know, Steve said, but I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think before you answer me. The studio had gone completely quiet. 200 people, a full production crew, a competing family who stood at their own podium suddenly not sure where to look. All of it still. How long have you and this woman been married? Gary said. 26 years. 26 years. Steve repeated it slowly, not as a question. As a fact, he was asking everyone in the room to sit with. 26 years. And she came out here today on national television and she was good. She was sharp. She was having the time of her life. And the first thing you did when she did something right was make sure everyone around you knew it was not quite right enough. Gary opened his mouth. Steve raised a hand, not aggressively, but with the calm authority of a man who has earned the right to finish a sentence. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I am genuinely asking you, do you know what you just did? But the silence that followed Steve Harvey's question was one of those rare silences that television almost never produces and almost always remembers. It was not the silence of dead air or awkwardness. It was the silence of a room full of people collectively holding their breath because something real was happening. Gary looked at his wife, and for the first time, perhaps in a very long time, he actually looked at her. Not past her, not through her, at the way she was standing, at the careful, practiced composure she was holding together in front of 200 strangers and a national television camera, at the effort it was costing her. Steve Harvey did not wait for Gary to find the words. He turned, gently, deliberately, to face Donna. And what he said next is the thing that people who were in that studio that day will repeat for the rest of their lives. Ma'am, I need you to hear me say something. You are good at this. You came out here and you competed and you were quick and you were smart and you held your own. And the people in this audience saw it. I saw it, and if nobody else is going to tell you that today, I am telling you right now, you did good. You should be proud of yourself. Donna Mitchell pressed her lips together. She nodded once, and then, because she was a woman who had spent a lifetime being graceful, even when grace was hard, she simply said, "Thank you," but her eyes were full. The audience erupted, not in the loud, performative way of a game show crowd that has been prompted to cheer. In the other way, the spontaneous, unscripted, from the chest way that only happens when a room full of people feels something together at the same moment. Several women in the front rows were visibly emotional. Two of them had their hands over their mouths. An elderly woman near the easel was gripping her companion's arm, because every person in that room, man or woman, married or single, young or old, recognized what they were seeing. They had either lived it themselves, or they had watched someone they loved live it. That specific, grinding, invisible diminishment that does not leave bruises but leaves marks just the same, and they were watching it be named, out loud, by someone with the courage and the platform to name it. Steve Harvey then did something that completed the moment. He turned back to Gary, and his tone was not angry. It was not contemptuous. It was something harder and more honest than either of those things. It was the tone of a man speaking to another man, directly, without performance, without cruelty, about something that matters. I'm going to say this to you as a man who has made his own mistakes, who has had to learn some things the hard way. You have a woman who has been with you for 26 years, who got up this morning and got dressed and came out here because she was excited about something, and she wanted you to be part of it. That's not nothing. That is everything. Don't let the small moments be the place where she finds out how you really see her. Because trust me, she is paying attention. They always are. Gary Mitchell did not speak for a long moment. When he did speak, his voice was different, quieter. The casual confidence had left it. You're right, he said. That was wrong. I'm sorry. He looked at Donna. I'm sorry, he said again, and this time it was not for the audience or the cameras or Steve Harvey. It was just for her. Donna looked at her husband for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Not dramatically, not for the cameras, with the quiet, habitual tenderness of a woman who has loved the same person for a very long time and has not stopped, even when it was hard. The audience responded to that small gesture with more emotion than they had given anything else that day. Steve Harvey let the moment breathe. Then, because he is also a professional and this was still a television show, he smiled his enormous smile and said, "Now, can we please get back to playing this game? Because I believe the Mitchell family has some money to win." The laughter that came back into the room was different from the laughter that had been there before. Warmer, more real, the kind that comes after something true has been said and the air has been cleared. The Mitchell family did not win the 20,000 that day. They played well. Donna in particular was magnificent in the final rounds, her confidence visibly restored, her answers sharp and her enjoyment completely genuine. But the Okonkwo family edged them out in a close, good-natured finish that left both families laughing. What happened after the cameras stopped rolling, however, was something that the production team would talk about for a long time. Gary Mitchell asked to speak to Steve Harvey personally before the families left the building. He found him backstage, still in his suit, running through notes for the next taping. Gary extended his hand. Steve shook it. "I needed to hear that," Gary said simply. "I didn't know I was doing it. I mean, I think I knew. But I didn't know how it looked, how it felt." Steve Harvey looked at him for a moment, and then said something that Gary would later tell his pastor, his son, and eventually a room full of men at a marriage retreat in Atlanta. "The people we love the most are the ones we forget to be careful with, because we think they will always be there. Start acting like they might not be. Everything changes when you do that." The clip of the exchange, from Steve's initial pause through Donna's quiet, "Thank you," and Gary's apology, went online the evening the episode aired and reached 1 million views within 12 hours. By the end of the following weekend, it had been shared across every major social platform in the country. But unlike many viral moments, which peak fast and disappear just as quickly, this one kept moving. It moved because of who was sharing it. It was not being shared primarily by young people looking for drama or conflict. It was being shared by women in their 50s who were texting it to their sisters with no caption, because no caption was needed. It was being shared by men in their 60s who had watched it 3 times and were quiet afterward in a way their wives noticed. It was being shared by adult children who sent it to their parents with the simple message, "This reminded me of you," sometimes meaning their father, sometimes meaning their mother, sometimes meaning both. Marriage and family therapists began referencing the clip in sessions, not as a cautionary tale or a piece of entertainment, but as a piece of visual shorthand for a conversation that many couples struggle to have because the behavior it depicts is so common and so normalized that naming it can feel like an overreaction. The clip made the naming easier. Here it was, right there on screen, quiet, undramatic, instantly recognizable. And here was the response it deserved, modeled by a man that millions of Americans already trusted. The response from older audiences was particularly striking. Men and women who had been married for decades, people who had weathered genuine hardship together, who had built families and endured losses and come out the other side, watched that clip and felt something complicated. Some of them recognized Gary, some of them recognized Donna, some of them honestly recognized both. A retired high school principal from Memphis, 61 years old and married for 34 years, posted a response that was shared nearly as widely as the clip itself. She wrote, "I have had the joy sucked out of 10,000 small moments by a look or a comment or a laugh that was not meant for me. I have learned to dim myself down so that nobody notices when it happens." Watching that woman stand there and hold herself together, and then watching that man actually hear what he had done, I cried for an hour. Not because it was sad, because I had forgotten that someone could actually hear it. Her husband read the post. He did not comment on it publicly, but he called her into the kitchen that evening, poured 2 glasses of sweet tea, sat down at the table, and said, "I want you to tell me when I do that. Starting now." She told their story at a church women's retreat 3 months later. By her own account, half the room was in tears before she was finished. Steve Harvey, for his part, was characteristically understated when interviewers asked him about the moment. He did not claim credit. He did not frame it as a lesson he had planned to teach. "I just said what needed to be said," he told one radio host. "That woman came in there and did her thing beautifully and somebody needed to acknowledge it. That is all I did. I acknowledged it. Every woman in every room deserves that." His response was clipped, shared, and added to the cascade of content that kept the moment alive across platforms for weeks. Donna Mitchell gave one interview several months after the episode aired. She was gracious and measured, exactly as people who knew her would have predicted. She said that the day had been one of the most unexpectedly meaningful of her adult life. Not because of Steve Harvey's words, though she was grateful for them, but because of what happened in the weeks that followed, quietly, at home, where no cameras were rolling and no audience was watching. "Gary is a good man. She said, without qualification or hesitation. He had a habit he didn't know he had. A lot of men do. A lot of women do too, in different ways. The thing about habits is that you can't change them until someone holds up a mirror. Steve Harvey held up a mirror on national television. That is not a comfortable thing to have happen. But it was the right thing. And Gary, he looked in the mirror. That is what I am most grateful for. Not that somebody called it out, but that my husband looked. She was asked if she thought the marriage was stronger now. She smiled, the full, unguarded smile of a woman who is no longer working to hold something together but simply living inside it. Yes, she said, I do. The story of the Mitchell family became one of those cultural moments that quietly reframes a conversation that needed reframing, not through legislation or advocacy or argument, but through the oldest and most powerful mechanism human beings have ever had. A story, seen by millions of people, about two things that most of them already believed in, even when life made it hard to practice the dignity of the person you chose and the courage to say something when you see it being ignored. For the audience in that studio, and for the millions who watched from home, it was a reminder that the most important room in anyone's life is not the one with cameras in it. It is the kitchen table, the quiet drive home, the moment before sleep when you have a choice about the last thing you say. Steve Harvey stood at a game show podium and reminded an entire country of something its grandmothers already knew, that how you treat the person standing next to you, in the small, unremarkable moments that nobody is watching, is who you actually are. And that when someone holds you to that standard, not with cruelty, not with judgment, but with the calm and steady conviction that people deserve better, the right response is not defensiveness. The right response is to listen. Gary Mitchell listened. Donna Mitchell is still smiling that smile, and somewhere in a city in Georgia, two people who have been married for 26 years are sitting at a kitchen table together, and the air between them is a little cleaner than it was before a Thursday afternoon in spring, when a man with a microphone decided to say the thing that needed to be said. That is the real prize, and no game show has ever given out anything worth more.